Welcome to Business Notes. I'm your host, Diane Bogino. Our guest today is Diane Weinberg, who has been a practicing elder law attorney in Georgia since 2011. Diane is a well-respected attorney from both her peers and her clients. She is a Martindale-Hubbell AV preeminent rated attorney, has an AVVO rating of 10 out of 10, and in 2020 was recognized as a Georgia super lawyer. She received the award again in 2021. Diane teaches attorneys nationally on elder law topics and was a recent candidate for the position of Fulton County Probate Court Judge. Now, here's Diane to teach us how to protect our elderly loved ones. Diane, thank you for being on the show today. Welcome to Business Notes.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes, it's great to see you again. So let's dive into this. What made you become interested in elder law?
It's a little bit of a long story. I'll try to condense it. I was actually a railroad attorney of all crazy things, which was a lot of fun, actually getting to climb on locomotives. And again, it had a real human touch. You were dealing with you were just dealing with the conductors and the management, management and going out and visiting locomotives. It was a blast. But my husband accepted a position in Reno, Nevada, which meant I was going to be an unemployed railroad attorney in Reno, Nevada. Railroad law tends to happen in jurisdictions that are favorable to the work that I practiced involved employees, essentially the railroad equivalent of workers' compensation. And those happen in areas that are favorable to railroad employees. And apparently Reno, Nevada is not one of those jurisdictions. So I said, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because I'm going to do something in Reno. Well, my husband's company never moved to Reno. At the very last minute, they decided to stay in Atlanta. So I said, okay, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? Do I want to go back to railroad law? I was actually on maternity leave at the time anyway. So I met with this wonderful elder law attorney. I'll give him absolute credit, Ira Leff, who I adore. And he is really one of the founders of elder law in the state of Georgia. And I met with him and I met with his client. They allowed me to sit in. And I saw that the way that they were helping people through that process of aging and all those crises and challenges that we have today. It's not easy to go sit in that rocking chair with a glass of lemonade and watch the grandkids on the lawn. It takes a lot to get there. So after meeting with Ira, I remember driving up to my house, going up 85, saying, this is what I want to be when I grow up. Completely inspired.
Yeah, that's quite a switch. But tell us, what is elder law? What does that involve?
Sure. Elder law is kind of a misnomer. It's really helping people with disabilities plan for their long-term care. But it came out of attorneys about 30, 40 years ago who were dealing with their elderly relatives who couldn't stay at home anymore, but couldn't afford nursing homes. And people were trying to figure out the law surrounding moving somebody into a facility. And that's where elder law came from. But it involves really has some kind of disability. So you're dealing with children that turn the age 18 that have Down syndromes or autism or another disabling condition, right? They can't speak for themselves. I have an unfortunate number of clients that have MS. MS has just been a terrible disease, and they find themselves disabled and often unable to stay at home or impacted cognitively from the illness. So you're dealing with about 12 different areas of law that meet in a very weird, they intersect in very weird ways and cause very unique challenges. So it can be housing law, it deals with Social Security law, which, by the way, encompasses Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, disability, and retirement law. It deals with veterans benefits, it deals with tax laws, it deals with state trust and estate laws. As you're just dealing with all these, like I said, these unique laws. You really have to be, you can't be an expert in all of them. You have to be fluent in a lot of them. But most of elder law attorneys, you pick some areas that you focus in because, again, it's just too broad a spectrum. But it really, elder law focuses on how you're going to help people manage their long-term care when they don't have the ability to manage it themselves. Maybe because of a cognitive impairment, or they financially don't have the resources either. How, again, do you really bring in those public benefits regardless of your political affiliation, in the Johnson administration, we decided we're not going to step over our elderly and disabled on the street. So what are those laws that provide that safety net to our population?
That's a lot. Sounds like you have to be a genius almost.
Thank you. It's not really, it's a little bit of a masochist, because you really need to spend a lot of time studying very complicated laws, and you feel a little bit better. There's an opinion coming out of the Eastern District of New York where they describe the Social Security as an assault on the English language. So you feel a little better when you sit there and look at the statute and go, that makes no sense. So it didn't make sense for the judge either.
Good grief. So in the introduction, I talked about you being a super lawyer. So tell us a little bit, what does that entail? I mean, do you get a cape or what?
You know, I would like a cape. I've been asking for it. I understand it's on back order. But the super lawyer is a designation that you are nominated by your colleagues, and you get references as well. We ask references for our clients. Hey, come in. I've been nominated. Can you say nice things about me? But it's a recognition among attorneys and your clients that you provide superior services. And again, it's a designation. I believe less than 5% of the attorneys in the country actually receive this designation. So I'm my fragile ego is very proud of this designation. I actually work very hard to try to provide with excellent services. And so it's nice to get that recognition both from them and from my colleagues that I'm succeeding in that effort.
Wow, congratulations. That's quite an honor. Yes.
Thank you.
Diane, what is the difference between like the power of attorney and a guardianship or a conservatorship?
A power of attorney and a guardianship or conservatorship, these are all processes that are in place to help us when we can't necessarily help ourselves. We may have cognitive impairment, or sometimes, particularly with the power of attorney, maybe we're just older and don't feel like doing it anymore. These are a power of attorney is a document where you give somebody the ability to do something that you can do. So in Georgia, we refer to them as agents. In other states, they're called attorneys as fact. It's attorneys in fact. It's a very state specific here. So for example, I give my husband he's my agent under my power of attorney. And that means that he can do the I can do, but it's only to the extent I give him that power. So we describe it as the four corners of the document. So let me give you an example that if I say you can only write checks on my bank account in months that end with a Y, then he can't write a check on my account in June, okay, or April, right? Literally, it's that specific. Also, he has to what's called stand in my shoes, so that, and this is particular to people who from the Southeast who will understand this reference. So, and I have no personal skin in this game, by the way, so I need to give that need to give that disclaimer. So if I'm a big University of Georgia fan and my husband's a big University of Alabama fan, and he uses my power of attorney and makes a donation to the University of Alabama, which I am sure will be well used, but nonetheless, it's going against my Georgia my Georgia preferences, then he would not be stepping in my shoes, and I could remove him as my agent. Okay, so the agent is merely acting, doing what I would do if I had that capacity. And I do apologize because my dog does apparently have an opinion on this topic, and he's being very, very vocal when normally he's quiet all the time. He knows we're taping. So, now, a guardianship or conservatorship, and this term changes from place to place, so you've got to know where your jurisdiction is, but that is the court actually removing our fundamental rights. It's the court saying you lack, in Georgia, the standard is you lack capacity to make or communicate significant responsible decisions with respect to your health and safety, that's guardianship, you're guarding the person, or with respect to your financial affairs, that's conservatorship, you're conserving assets. So the court has said it's not that you can make bad decisions. We all get to make bad decisions, right? My kids will tell you I make hundreds of bad decisions every day. But it's can you take the information, process it, and come out with some kind of decision? is your decision based more on logic or more on a guess, if you will? You know, if you happen to come up with the right answer, it's not because you really understood the information that was coming in. So that's the difference. One is a voluntary, I'm giving you the ability to do what I can do myself. And the other is the court saying, you no longer have capacity to make these decisions. And so we're going to give this ability, take it from you, this fundamental right, we're taking it from you and we're giving it to somebody who can do it for you. So that is the difference. And again, there's a lot of confusion. I'll have people will have a guardianship or conservatorship in place. We'll go to a bank and the bank says, well, we need a power of attorney for that. I'm like, no, because at this point, the power of attorney, again, it's a contract. By the time the guardianship is in place, usually the guardianships will break the powers of attorney. They don't exist anymore. And because somebody doesn't have capacity, they can't do a new one. That's another important point. Powers of attorney can only be done when you're competent and when you have what's called capacity to contract. That's true in Georgia, check your state. So if I walk in with a conservatorship and say, here, I'm conservator for this person, they can't do a power of attorney anymore. And their power of attorney has been broken by the probate court. It doesn't exist. And again, there's just a lot of confusion in this area, both by, again, attorneys that don't practice in this area, by banks, by law enforcement. And so this is kind of if I have a mission, it's to teach people that difference to make it easier to help those who really are in need of that help.
We're going to put you on the webinar circuit.
Sounds good to me. I've offered to give this, and I put it out there. Any police force, any one of our first providers, I've always offered to do this seminar and explain it to them because it is so important. And I've seen, unfortunately, where police officers didn't understand, and there were bad results because the person lacked capacity to help themselves. So. I'm just a big advocate, and in fact, I think you would find most elder law attorneys we're all pretty passionate about that distinction and teaching people what that difference is.
Yeah, well, it's needed. Let's take a couple of scenarios. Okay, Diane, let's say that someone else has the power of attorney over my mom, but I'm concerned about how her money's being used. What can I do about that?
There are a few things. Again, some of it's state specific. You can, of course, always ask, and I usually try to encourage communication because so much of what I do is poor family communication, and sometimes it's just legitimate, I don't understand, can you explain this to me? Sometimes, depending on your jurisdiction, you can actually demand an accounting. If you find that somebody's using that power of attorney and suddenly they have a boat, or mom's house is no longer in their name, or they took a really nice vacation, demand an accounting. Say and see if you can get somebody to explain how that's being used. And in fact, there are court processes that you can actually go to court and demand that accounting and have that person report to the court how the funds are being spent. If it's severe enough, then we're looking at guardianship or conservatorship. We're actually having to go to court and take. Assuming there's a big assumption there, assuming mom doesn't have capacity. Now, this is where things do get tricky because if mom has capacity and she knows that one of her kids is stealing from her, as parents, it is a huge problem. I see a reaction. It is a huge problem because, first of all, as parents, we don't want to admit that we raise little thieves and that our thieves are stealing from us. There's really, don't underestimate that embarrassment factor. It's there. Do you want to call the police and have your child arrested because they've stolen money from you? That's a complicated situation. And I actually have a really hard time convincing or talking with people that are competent about taking action against their kids who have stolen life savings, who have caused them physical harm. It's really, it's hard. It's hard as parents to admit that we've messed up, and it's hard to admit to the world that we've put ourselves in this position, and we put ourselves in that position because we've got a kid who's misbehaving. It's hard. But assuming mom doesn't have capacity, then you're probably looking at going to court and getting that guardianship and conservatorship. And that's really another option you do have, before I forget, is contacting Adult Protective Services. you can contact them and ask them to come in. Now, again, this is very jurisdiction specific. People tend to think Adult Protective Services has more authority than it does. In Georgia, Adult Protective Services has the authority to come in. It has the authority to offer help if that person's willing to receive it. And it has the authority to refer it to the police for review, or to the Department of Family and Children's Services for review. But that's really the extent. It can't actually take, no one from that department can actually take any action. All they can do is conduct some initial investigation. But sometimes that's another way to get somebody's attention on this problem, is to go ahead and report it to APS. But again, usually we do recommend that you're probably looking at going to court to get a conservatorship over mom's assets to prevent that continued financial abuse.
Mm. Okay, here's another one. Let's say I want to see my dad, but my brother or sister won't allow me to see him. What can I do in that case?
Probably ending up in the same place. This is a scenario I see so often, and it's really tragic. You've got siblings. When you look at financial exploitation and other forms of elder abuse, and a lot of it's emotional, it's usually, at least what comes across my desk, I can only speak to that. I'm usually not looking at physical, I'm usually not looking at sexual abuse. I'm usually looking at some kind of emotional abuse and financial abuse. That's typical. And people come in and they're amazed. They say, Diane, my brother or my sister, they're millionaires. They live in this mansion. They have all this, they go on travel. Why would they be stealing from mom? Or why would they be stealing from dad? And the answer is because they can. Financial exploitation occurs for reasons other need. And the reason they're not letting you see dad is because they can. As siblings, there's very complex emotional, psychological, mental health issues going on in these cases. As siblings, we spend our youth learning how we can stick it to our other siblings, okay? We do that. We learn how to make them cry on command. It's one of our gifts, or one of our superpowers as kids. And it doesn't change as we get older. And so what we tend to see is we do tend to see the isolationism of adults that usually goes hand in hand with financial exploitation. It usually goes hand in hand with some kind of emotional abuse. Not always. Sometimes mom and dad are receiving amazing care. But there usually is something else going on. And those are always red flags. Isolationism of adults from family and friends is a form of elder abuse. Make no mistake about that. It is recognized. If you go and check on whatever, pick your website, go check on authorities, go check there are authorities in the area. Isolationism is a form of elder abuse. And it's also, interestingly, it's also a violation of First Amendment rights. Under the First Amendment of the Constitution, we are guaranteed the right of assembly. And so people are violating that First Amendment right by keeping mom and dad isolated. And here's what's really interesting, particularly if you've got somebody with cognitive decline. And this is where things really get challenging. That person becomes dependent on their caregiver, who may not be that well intended, and they don't want to upset the caregiver. So if somebody's keeping my parents from me and I want to go see them, and my sibling doesn't want me to see them, they're going to poison the well. They're going to tell mom and dad, first of all, stories about me that mom and dad don't necessarily understand, but they don't even necessarily have to do that. Mom and dad know they're going to upset my sibling. And so rather than upset that sibling, tip that apple cart where they're living, they're just going to say, no, I don't want to see Diane. But they may or may not understand why. These are really, really tough situations. And this is where guardianship is appropriate. Because again, you're trying to remove somebody from an unsafe situation or from an abusive situation.
Yeah, that's tough. So here's another scenario. Let's say my parents are getting older, and what can I do before the inevitable happens?
Well, yeah, cognitive decline is not inevitable, first of all. It used to be there was a thought that as you get older, you got senile, right? And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, and I'm not a doctor. I'm play one in my office, but I think more typically, as we get older, our file cabinets in our brains get full. It just gets harder to pull that information. But actual forgetfulness, I don't really know what's going on, that is actually a sign of some other process going on. There are a lot of dementia, a lot of different sources of that dementia. Anything from Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia, white matter disease. I'm trying to think, maybe hypoxia, somebody has oxygen deprivation due to COPD. Or, exactly, there's all kinds of sources. Sometimes as simple as a UTI, a urinary tract infection, can cause somebody to have dementia or dementia symptoms or medication mix-ups. There's all kinds of stuff. So, so anyway, what you really want to try to do is proper planning. That having been said, I will tell you, dementia trumps all. Dementia can really take a well thought out, well put together plan and make it very challenging. So a typical plan, when you look at these issues, one, you're going to look at powers of attorney, like we talked about. A power of attorney for healthcare, which in Georgia is called an advance directive for healthcare. It also contains a component called a living will, which is different than a will. A will is what you want done with your stuff when you die. A living will is, suppose I can't speak for myself, but I'm at the end of life. I'm in a state of permanent unconsciousness. I'm at the end of life of a terminal condition, and you can give me medications or stuff to make me live longer, or you can allow my natural death to occur without giving me what's called, food, hydration and nutrition, food and water, essentially. Not that I can't eat or drink, but suppose you have to give it to me through a tube. Do you want me to have it? That's a living will. So our advanced directive for healthcare, which says what you want in the event you can't speak for yourself, and it includes your living will. And by the way, one more thing, advanced directives for healthcare, like powers of attorney, don't take away your right to make your own medical decisions. They merely say what to do in the event you can't speak for yourself. Okay, so you always have the right to overrule whatever your kid says and whatever your kid wants. And the other rule is no pain, no pain. So advanced directives, just because you say, maybe I don't want nutrition and I don't want hydration, somebody, if they need to give you pain medication and hook you up to an IV to do that, they're going to do that. So advanced directive for healthcare, financial powers of attorney, those cover that. Also, a revocable living trust is another great way to manage your assets. It's unlike a power of attorney where you're giving somebody permission to act on your behalf. A trust actually is an entity that holds your stuff. So, for example, this would be a trust, right? It's holding. I don't know if you can see it. That's the problem with these things. You can't see it. If you see it, there you go.
In front of you.
Here it goes. Here's a trust. Okay, it's just a vessel holding something. In this case, it's holding pens. Do I have in here? Mostly pens and a couple pairs of scissors. Okay, but it can hold other things. It could hold a deed. It can hold jewelry. It can hold financial accounts. Whatever I put in this, and just we shape this trust so that it can hold whatever you need it to hold in the way you need it held. And whereas a bank might question a financial power of attorney and say, well, this power of attorney is 10 years old. Is this person who you say is your husband? Is he still your husband? The trustee actually has a designation of ownership over these assets. There's no question to those financial institutions. You as trustee have the right to manage these assets. So a trust can be a very powerful way to manage your assets in the event of incapacity. So those are our three most typical scenarios. I usually recommend talking with a financial planner and saying, if I went to an assisted living yesterday or a nursing home yesterday, how long are my assets going to last? Am I going to outlive my assets? And so then we talk about financial planning with public benefits if necessary. That's another important component, not just those planning documents, but how am I going to pay for it all? So that's another aspect of long-term care planning I think is often overlooked, but again, super important.
Mm. Well, it's good to know that there are things that we can do, like living wills, and plan for ourselves and bring our family in on our planning as well. I feel like you should send me a bill for all this, but don't, please.
This is what I love to do. Oh, one other important point before I forget, super important point. When you do your planning, you must, can't emphasize this enough, find the person who's going to act on your behalf. There's so many times I've seen plans sink, and the plan sank because, people spend, these are not cheap, some of these plans. They spend really good money. They've worked really hard, and they have the wrong person as their agent. And that person will rob them blind, will not provide for their care. And you don't pick your oldest kid because they're your oldest kid. You don't pick your son because he's your only son. You need to pick people who are reliable, who are trustworthy, who ask questions. And if you have kids that don't fall in that category, and I do have people who come in who say, I love my kids, but yeah, they can't balance a checkbook, or this one has a problem with addiction, and this one had been bankrupt 3 times. And that's not somebody who should ever manage your money. There are actually third parties now that will help manage your money, who will act on your behalf in the event that you need somebody to make medical decisions for you. So definitely consider those options as well. So sorry, I just had to make that point, because again, you can have the best planning but if you pick your bad, we call them fiduciaries. If you have bad fiduciaries, it's not worth the paper it's written on.
No, thank you. That's great advice. Good information to know. Absolutely. Yeah. It's and these things are important because we are living longer, and who knew all of these things would happen when the medical sciences have allowed us to live as long as we are allowed to
There's the
live
good
now.
and the bad. We are around so much longer, which is wonderful, but we are also living with very expensive illnesses. I mean, dementia can last 10 years. And that means for 10 years, you have to find not all of those 10 years, dementia is a process, but at some point you're going to need 24-hour care. You need somebody to put you in a protective place, and it's expensive.
It is.
The average nursing home, a semi-private room in the Atlanta area, is between $8,000 and $9,000 a month. Private care in somebody's home, pre-pandemic, it was about 16. Now that prices have gone up, you're looking at $22 to $28 an hour for a caregiver. Now you times 24 hours times 30 days a month. It's expensive. The best offset you can have for that is again, good financial planning, long-term care insurance for those that qualify. It's getting more and more difficult to qualify. But again, and of course, talking with family members, coming up with that plan and writing it down. Elder law attorneys absolutely should be can and should be part of this discussion, or your trusted estate attorney, and a good financial planner, somebody who can look at your assets and say, this is where you are and this is what you need.
Wow. I'm in the wrong business, obviously. So I need
not at all.
I need to open a nursing home.
Let me tell you, in my next life, actually where we struggle the most is not in nursing homes. It's in facilities for individuals with developmental disabilities. They reach 20, they outlive their parents. What do you do if you've got a kid with Down syndrome?
That's right.
And they used to be people with Down syndrome didn't live into their 30s. Now they live in their 60s. And by the way, they have a tendency to develop dementia. So I really think, actually, if I ever won the lottery, a house for people who need, for younger folks who need long-term care, that's kind of where I would totally invest it. But I mean, there's always a need for nursing homes. And as you live in the Atlanta area, you can see there are assisted livings and memory care units on every corner. They are anticipating, obviously, that they're going to fill all of these spots. So we definitely have an aging population, and there's definitely a need for senior services.
I'm going to come live with you. Okay.
Oh, sounds good. Golden Girl style.
Right. Diane, thank you so much. You are just a wealth of information. And this is something that's so important, because look, it's going to happen to all of us, or the alternative. So
it beats the alternative. Yes.
Yes. And the goal is to live as long as we can. And I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. It was great to see you again.
Well, thank you. And again, I appreciate the opportunity, and I thank you, and thanks everyone. And if they have any additional questions, you can always, I assume you've got my information that's being published. Feel free to reach out to us, and we will do our best to answer your questions. Or I actually do have a policy. If I can't answer your question, I'm going to find somebody who can.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So thank you again.
Thank you for watching Business Notes. We've been speaking with Diane Weinberg, practicing elder law attorney. I'm your host, Diane Bogino, bringing you business ideas you can bank on.